And the whole thing should probably capture.
No, you're not being captured. Yeah, your audio is being captured.
Your spot now. Oh, your son? Oh, wonderful. What's your name? Zaid? Nice to meet you, Zaid.
Come on, guys, we're just going to start. You guys ready? Blake?
Yes.
You guys ready?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Awesome. You guys good?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Faisal Fansuri. I'm the Chief Development Officer for NCCM, the National Council of Canadian Muslims. We're happy to welcome you on behalf of the Al Rashid Mosque and the Canadian Muslim vote to this Town Hall debate informational session. We have Munir from Canadian Muslim Vote. He may want to share a couple words just before we start here.
So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Munir Nazir, and I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the Canadian Muslim Vote. So, the Canadian Muslim Vote is a non-profit, non-partisan, and grassroots organization that aims to increase civic engagement of Canadian Muslims through outreach and education. This means we work all over Canada with multiple Islamic organizations to help and try to increase the turnout of Muslim voters in the election. The Canadian Muslim Vote, or TCMV, is, as I mentioned, non-partisan. So we don't tell you who to vote for. All we ask is that you go out and vote. I'm so happy to see such a large turnout today and that we're able to have this live stream, because this is an important event and an important election, specifically for Muslims, considering all we've been through in the past year. As a once-per-century type of event, the pandemic has already and will continue to significantly shape the policies today of today and tomorrow. Healthcare, the economy, privacy rights, the environment, housing and immigration are just a few issues at stake. Whoever Canadians choose to lead the country on September 20th will be responsible for managing Canada's response to the pandemic as well as the post-pandemic roadmap. So it's pivotal that Canadian Muslims have their say in the electoral process. Islamophobia has also been on the rise, especially here in our community, with multiple attacks against Muslim women. We have to elect someone to ensure that combating Islamophobia remains at the forefront of the national discourse, and that more concrete steps are taken going forward by voting and electing officials who we feel can serve the Muslim community. We are serving a duty not only to the Muslims in this community, but the Canadians across the country by trying to create an anti-Islamophobic Canada. By voting, we ourselves are taking steps to combat the hatred in Canada and are making the community safer for our brothers and sisters in Islam. Through our partnership with the NCCM and the cooperation of nationwide Islamic institutions and many of our volunteers, we are able to put such an event like this one in order to get you the information you're entitled to as Canadians, so that you can go out and make the most informed decision, and you can decide who you feel would best represent the Muslims here in Edmonton. So I strongly urge you all to listen attentively to the candidates and their platform and to share the information with others in the riding. Also, check out the TCMV social media and the website CanadianMuslimVote.ca to get more information. And to learn more information of how you can vote and where you can vote, go to the electioncanada.ca. And also you can be able to talk to an NCCM or TCMV representative. Before I leave, I want to leave you off with a statistic. Out of the 338 ridings in Canada, Muslims can impact 107 of them. That's if we all go out to vote. So advanced polling has started, and the TCMV has campaigned this as Muslim Vote Weekend. So after this, we urge you all to go out and vote. And if you're unable to vote today, September 20th is the election. So once again, please inshallah, go out to vote. And assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Mayor. We have an NCCM have a simple mandate: to stand against Islamophobia, to stand for justice. It's such what the purpose of this town hall, this information session, this debate is. is an opportunity for you to ask the questions you need to make an informed decision for the voice here within Edmonton Griesbach. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome our candidates here at this table. Right from the onset, I will recognize that MP Kerry Diotte would not be attending this debate. He has excused himself. MP Garnett is to be here representing the Conservative Party. However, Mr. Garnett is not from this constituent. Mr. Garnett is running late. If he does join, which I'm advised that he will be joining, you're more than welcome to ask questions around that time. But also like to make sure that we are welcoming Dr. Habiba Mohamud as their Liberal candidate, and we have Blake Desjarlais, candidate from NDP. So thank you so much for being here. The debate format will be as follows. I will ask a question, give a minute and a half to each candidate to answer, and then open about 7 minutes to debate at the end of each section. At the conclusion of our 6 questions that we will be asking, we'll open up to the audience to ask questions. I will only ask, respectfully for the audiences, to just raise your hand, and we'll point you out to stand up and ask your questions, and we'll make it nice and cordial to make sure that candidates have a chance to really hear and understand whatever questions that you're asking. Before moving on, as we think about September 20th and the federal elections and the implications for the next 4 years, I cannot help but remember other dates. I cannot help but remember January 29th, 2017. I cannot help but remember September 12th, 2020. And I cannot help but remember June 6th, 2021. The Quebec City mosque attack, the IMO killing, the London terror attack. I'm going to say the names of the Shahada. Ibrahim Berry, Mahmoud Berry, Khalid Balachimi, Abu Bakr Tabti, Abdul Karim Hussain, Azadeen Sufyan, Salman Afzal, Madiha Salman, Yamna Afzal, Dalit Afzal, Muhammad Aslam's office. Islamophobia continues to kill our people. It continues to endanger our people as we've seen them right here within Edmonton. I want us to think about that as we begin our discussion tonight. And before I pass it over to the candidates, I want us to think about what it means for us to have had such attacks of terrorists on our soil. Yet today, just 2 years later, the survivors of those attacks in Quebec City to be banned from being in certain public sector jobs under the CAQ's Bill 21, if they wear religious symbols. And we'll get into that later on tonight. But I want to begin by remembering those who have fallen and those who cannot join us tonight. And thus, when I ask questions tonight, I want there to be an understanding that it's in that light. If I come off as strong, it's because I feel stronger. While we at NCCM are a non-partisan organization, we believe that each and every leader who puts their hat in the ring to be the Prime Minister or a candidate representing their constituent should answer the questions around safety, security, and the feature that is top of mind for many of us. I'll now begin by passing it to each candidate for about a 2-minute opening introduction, just to let you know that who you are and why should you be considered to be voting for you. So we'll start with Dr. Habiba, please.
Thank you so much, Faisal. Usually I'm in the middle of the team, but today I'm on the table, and thank you so much for the opportunity you have given us. My name is Dr. Habiba. I am originally from Kenya, Kenyan Somali. I mean many things to many people. I am a mother of 3 girls who has raised all of them here in Edmonton. I'm a wife, and my husband is here in the crowd. I'm a role model. I'm a mentor. I am also a public servant for 12 years. I have been teaching the universities, all the 3 of them, U of A, McEwan, and Concordia when I was very heavy pregnant. I came to study in this country as an international student initially. I have been involved in civil society. I have been part of the people that have actually come up with the 61 recommendations for NCCM. And I am ready to take up the job of representing Edmonton Griesbach and even beyond because of who I am. I am a Muslim lady, I'm hijabi, I'm black, I'm a mother, I'm a woman. I have been, I carry all the intersectionalities with me. And I thought I would be speaking to the issues of all the people I represent, including immigrants, minorities, you name it. I am actually the face of the diverse people of Edmonton Griesbach and our country, a beautiful, great country. So that is who I am, and I'm running to represent Edmonton Griesbach. Thank you.
Blake.
Well, Tansei folks, Blake Desjarlais, Nisagasun, Pakchahanse, Miskuchi, Waskagan, Notsinia, Otapamisoak, Nia. My name is Blake Desjarlais. I'm a Cree Métis person from this land here, where we call Miskuchi Waskagan. That word means Beaver Hill House. And nearly 300 years ago, people from across the ocean visited our territory and they established forts. And one of those forts was named Fort Augustus and Edmonton House, where we're present here today. The Cree word for that place is the Miskuchi Waskagan. And so from my people, Tawau to a Miskuchi Waskagan. It means welcome to Edmonton and the land of the Cree people. So I've been tremendously blessed to have the invitation from you folks to be here with all of you. I'm tremendously blessed to have that opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Habiba Mohamud, for grounding us and why we're here and why it's so important to have the community gather and hear perspectives of each and every one of us and the details of each party and the people who speak on their behalf. And so I want to make sure that I can do the best I can to represent your interests as elected member of Griesbach to actually combat some serious issues that were just outlined just a minute ago. Canada is #1 in a very terrible stat. That's being the #1 country in the G7 for hate crimes against specifically Muslims. Terrible reality we live in Canada. Indigenous people, like myself, we've suffered 150 years in this country pushing the boundaries of justice from day one. And we have a saying or in our culture, which is, you might have seen some of our beautiful beadwork in the past. Each and every one of those beads are like an individual. The thread that unites us is our solidarity and commitment to each other as neighbors, as relatives, and people who share in this beautiful place we call Canada. We must remain strong and united, and the tighter we are bound together, the closer and more stronger we'll be. I grew up with that message. I was born here in Edmonton. My parents have lived in Edmonton. My great-great-grandfather was a fur trader here in Edmonton when we first established Fort Augustus. And today I'm so happy to see how far we've come. A truly welcoming and diverse place. But we have so much work to do. We are very far from a perfect society. But I'll leave that to the questions a bit later. I'm the youngest son of 8, and my mom, she had a tough time. My father, he unfortunately passed away when I was just 12 years old in a work-related accident. I grew up pretty fast at that point, wanted to make sure my mother got what she needed. She worked 4 jobs. But we'll answer some of those questions a bit later. It just means a lot for me to be here. Thanks for that.
Thanks so much, Blake. Appreciate it. I do want to recognize that Mr. Garnett is in the room representing Mr. Kerry, who cannot be here. Mr. Garnett, just on behalf of the Muslim community, on behalf of the NCCM, and on behalf of those who are attending that too, I do have to respectfully I'm disappointed of Mr. Kerry not to be attending here. I'm sure there are a lot of questions to be asked of Mr. Kerry, but I will open the floor to you to say a few words and share a few words on behalf of this constituent as much as you can, on behalf of yourself.
Thank you. Salam alaikum. I want to start by apologizing for being late, and not to make excuses at all, but I want to share that I was meeting with members of the Afghan community before I came here, and hearing some very... should I hold that? Okay, thank you. And hearing some very heart-wrenching testimony from people of that community about what members of their families are going through. And so thank you for your indulgence, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here speaking for the Conservative Party and share a little bit about my own background and the work that I've done, as well as the work that our party hopes to do in Parliament. This mosque has some fond connections for me. After September 11th, I was in high school, and we were living in Sherwood Park. We realized, we were seeing all these things in the media about the Muslim community, and we didn't have much understanding or connection. So I went with my father and some of my siblings, and we came here and just said, hey, we want to meet some people and learn and understand. And the folks that were there at the time, sort of out of the blue, took a couple hours with us. We had a long conversation just learning about Islam. And as a person of faith from the Christian tradition, I see great areas of commonality, shared values, and a shared commitment certainly to justice and human dignity. I've been a member of Parliament for the last 6 years, and it's been an honor for me to work closely with members of the Muslim community on many issues. In particular, I've worked a lot on international human rights issues. I've been very involved in the work around recognizing the Uyghur genocide, the horrific treatment of Muslims in China, and the Rohingya genocide. And there is so much work that still needs to be done advocating for justice and human rights, recognizing as well the interconnections between some of the human rights abuses that happen overseas and the hate crimes and acts of violence that happen domestically. Sometimes there's a spilling over of some of that rhetoric that we see. And,
I'm just going to say that we need to wrap up the introduction.
Okay.
So thanks so much. We need to get into the
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I look forward to responding to all your questions.
Thanks so much, all the candidates. I will remind all the candidates that just for the sake of time, that we are going to be keeping a very strict hold on the time. If you do pass, I will make a comment, respectfully so. Do not be disgruntled with myself or candidates. We're here to respect the time. So if you do hear from me that you may see a signal that say let's go or anything else, that means that we need to wrap up and move on. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay from the background? I just got a message that you were not able to hear from me.
This way, yes. So when you ask the question, could you address us this way?
Okay, fantastic, I will. So let's start off with the first question. Are we good? Yes. Fantastic. Let's talk about an issue that's top of my mind, and many of our folks is here in the audience, jobs. A 2015 report from the Canadian Dawn Foundation found that unemployment among Canadian Muslims was average 6 points higher. Unemployed, so the unemployment among Canadian Muslims was 6 points higher than the average national average. Obviously, issues related to race and racialization, as well as socioeconomic stratification, are key parts of that problem. And we've seen COVID-19 have disproportionate effects on our communities. How would you go about rebuilding our economy from the ravages of COVID-19? Mr. Blake.
Thanks so much for that question. And as we've seen it in Alberta, I'm a former energy worker. I know what it's like to go through the boom and bust cycle of our energy industry here in Alberta, and we just heard recently from many other families who feel the same, that you can't get ahead trying to get a paycheck when you're laid off 4 times in the same calendar year. It's hard to do that. We need in Alberta a perspective that's going to ensure that there's good paying jobs, not just for a week or 2 months when the shutdown for an operation is taking place. We need jobs for a long time. Good, long, lasting, stable, union paying jobs, where when we put something into a job site, we actually get something back as workers. And so the New Democrats, we're committed to building 1 million jobs across the country by 2022. We know that we're far behind on the climate change game, and we have to make gains and we have to make investments now. It's a short time frame, but we can do it, and we have to make sure to attract folks so that the Muslim community has participation in that investment, so that there's jobs and good paying future for them.
Dr. Habiba.
I will first of all add on to the problems as not employment. People are not employed, but they're also unemployed. I have daughters myself who have finished the university degree. and they are still on minimum job wage. They keep coming back to me and saying, hey mom, when will we ever get to what we have been trained for, the job that we've been trained for, and when are we going to get the pay that we actually deserve? It's really right in here. I have a PhD myself. I'm supposed to be getting one of the highest tops there. It's because of my own hijab. Let's face it, the truth. It's because of my own hijab. And probably the immigrant I am, and probably speaking with an accent, and probably elderly lady, that I am unable to go up. So this is an issue that we need to really fix. And the only way we can fix is to actually make sure that we have a balance between environmental preservation, economic development, and the people that we take care of. Yes.
We have a detailed plan for economic recovery. Folks can read it online, conservative.ca/plan. I think one of the big differences for our party is that we are supportive of pipeline construction. We're supportive of developments in the energy sector. We take a different approach from the other parties when it comes to the energy jobs, which drive a great deal of opportunity in this part of the country. There are other aspects of our plan, stimulus for new hires, shifting some of the benefits to actually supporting new hires to confront that unemployment rate directly. And one of the issues as well with inclusive growth, with underemployment of newcomers, is the issue of credential recognition. So our platform uniquely commits to having a national task force on credential recognition, working on improving that credential recognition, also working on pre-qualification, so that newcomers to Canada can have mechanisms to actually get those Canadian level qualifications before they come to Canada, either through distance learning or through partnerships with other universities. There are many issues of racism and other things that contribute to underemployment in certain communities, but one of the key things that we can tackle is that credential recognition, because we know that there are people who come here from other countries who have skills that they're not able to use because of problems and barriers in terms of...
Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I'm leaving the floor now for anyone to review anyone's comments. Mr. Blake, since you have the first question, you're more than welcome to start the debate on the issue of unemployment when it comes to Canadian Muslims within our system.
Well, I certainly think that we have to take a serious approach to climate change. Like, it's not going away. This year we've seen, for example, here in Alberta, and elders, whether they're from the Muslim community or Indigenous community, can see it. Things have changed. Our environment is changing. We're seeing record low crop return. Our crops are being burned as we speak. No one's talking about that. We had the highest record of heat wave in Alberta and in British Columbia, some of the largest forest fires. There has to be a better solution than just continuing the same way we've been doing it for so long. We need difference. We need a change in the status quo. We actually need better investment. We need to make longer lasting jobs by making sure we actually get ahead in both the crisis, that's the climate change crisis, and the unemployment crisis. These things go hand in hand. We can solve both problems at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive like other parties would have you believe. We can do both, create good paying, long-lasting prosperity without sacrificing the hard-working, hard-skilled labor that we have here in Alberta.
Mr. Ryan, would you like to say any comments on
Well, sure. I would agree with the principle that we can have an economic recovery as well as addressing the environmental challenges we face, and I think our platform does it. We have a strong, effective environmental plan, and one that recognizes at the same time that if we shut down key productive sectors of our own economy, that's going to push jobs to other countries which don't have the same environmental records. And in fact, the Liberal plan does not involve any kind of border adjustment tariffs to offset the fact that we have companies that are moving jobs out of the country, producing products elsewhere that don't conform to the same environmental standards, and then selling those products back into Canada. So our environmental plan includes things like carbon tariffs. It includes a prohibition on the export of plastic waste to other countries. But it also recognizes that we can have a strong energy sector, that we can develop a clean, effective energy sector here in Canada, including supporting pipeline construction, create those jobs while having a commitment to a strong environmental plan.
Dr. Habiba.
I must say, as a Muslim, I know very well that when the jobs are scarce, like we saw in COVID-19, they are the last to be hired and the first to be fired. We know that. Those are facts. Now, you are talking to someone here who is an environmental sociologist. What that means is we have to balance between the environment which is our fossil fuels, is being blamed for, and the jobs, and the economy, and also people. So what we have to do is we cannot overnight, kill the oil and gas industry. So many people are getting their jobs through that. But that industry should evolve, should transition to a very responsible energy technology, clean energy technology. This way, and actually the Liberal government has earmarked trillions and trillions of dollars to be able to do that. And so I am just talking to my Muslim brothers and sisters, see how we can get involved in our jobs in the oil and gas industry, but at the same time to be prepared to where the world is going, because we want Canada to be a global player in clean energy. And if we're left behind, we will always be left behind. We have the expertise, we have the technology, we need to move towards that industry. And I would say that once I'm elected, because of my expertise, because of my involvement in the community, because I will not be having any learning curve whatsoever, because I understand the issues and I have been recording the issues of the Muslim community, I will take your issues to Ottawa and really be the loudest speaker there. Thank you very much.
Great comments.
Well, I certainly think that when we're looking at climate change in North America, particularly in Alberta, as the former, I've led the province's climate change initiative as the co-chair of the carbon levy program, where we invested nearly $600 million into actually diversifying the economy. We created 6,000 permanent jobs, 15,000 temporary jobs in partnership with Indigenous people south of us, the Tsuut'ina First Nations, and the city of Calgary. We built the largest solar field in Western Canada. You can go visit it, it's a real place, and I was the chair of that program. It was a phenomenal success. We had former energy workers, some colleagues of mine when I used to work in the oil patch, actually retrain and enter that field. I've seen it happen. You can go visit it. Right now I'm very interested in things like geothermal for our province. If you take a look at how many holes we've punctured into our, by fracking across northern Alberta, if you've been there, you know that they're not cleaned up. We need a government that's going to clean up the mess and recycle as much as we can to get better profits, better margins, and get better dollar in your pocket. Because this is about workers. The NDP is a workers' party. We're workers first. And we're going to make sure that put food on the table for families as our #1 priority, and that means good jobs that last a long time.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that actually before the last election, Rachel Notley was very critical of the federal NDP for not representing the interests of workers and not appreciating the value of things like pipeline projects. We are seeing diversification in Alberta. We're a strong economy that covers a broad range of sectors. One of those sectors, though, it includes a strong energy sector. And we can be part of a stronger, cleaner energy sector that continues to fuel the needs of the world. It doesn't make sense that we are importing oil into Eastern Canada without the same environmental standards, when we could be selling Western Canadian oil to Eastern Canada. So in terms of creating jobs and opportunity, what we've said for the economic recovery that Canada needs, it needs to be all sectors, all regions, and people of all backgrounds that are able to participate. So credential recognition, including the energy sector, concrete measures to advance workplace democracy and recognize the positive role that unions play. These are the things that are part of our plan. All sectors, all regions, people from all backgrounds, building that economic recovery. We can't take our prosperity for granted. We need a plan to get back to that prosperity that Canada has historically enjoyed.
Well, thanks so much. Let's get on to the second question, where things will get a little tighter, if you will. Here in Edmonton, we've been seeing repeated violent attacks on Edmonton Muslims, especially black Muslim women wearing hijab. Organizations like NCCM, the Africa Center, the Al-Rashid, the IFSA, the Sister Dialogue have been working to support these victims and end the violence. But of course, it's not just an Albertan problem. This is a Canadian issue. Islamophobia is a Canadian issue. We've been seeing violence from coast to coast. What would your commitments be to be stopping violent Islamophobia? If I speak in terms of Edmonton, if I speak in terms of Alberta, but first and by larger, what it means for Canada itself. So Garnet, I'll get you the floor first.
Sure, thank you. Well, we need to start with moral leadership. Leaders need to speak out against Islamophobia, need to speak out against violence, against the Muslim community, against any community. And certainly our party has done that. We want to work with other parties in speaking out against this, working together to combat it. There are other issues beyond speaking, though, other forms of action that we need to take. So our platform, for instance, calls for the clear criminalization of any incitement to violence, including in the online space. Now, we can protect people's rights to have different opinions about religious and other questions, but when there's incitement to violence, when people are talking about or promoting acts of violence against other people, that needs to cross a clear line, and we need to have clear criminalization of that and work together to ensure effective enforcement. I know that online hate, the online incitement to violence is a key concern that people have as a contributor to this. So I think the criminalization element, as well as the leadership element, and by the way, we need to be consistent about that across the board in every case.
Dr. Diotte.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. It's crucial. Again, being a Muslim woman, hijabi, and as you said, black as well, I don't see the difference between other racialized women and myself, but the issue here is, my friend here has talked about human rights issues and this should be condemned. Trudeau was the first person who called the white supremacists terrorists. It's never been said anywhere else. It was him who said, and we're so proud of that. And that's why I'm a liberal candidate here. Now, the other thing is, when Harper himself took a coat to a woman who was wearing a niqab, that has never left my mind, never. What party is talking about human rights and protecting women who are wearing hijab when they could actually talk innocent women to court, and she wins, obviously, because we respect our constitution, and that was her constitutional right. And so here we are talking about defending, protecting women when we cannot even go for a walk, go to work, take the public transit, simply because of what our leaders have demonstrated in the past.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, and I started our discussion off today with giving you a serious stat. Canada leads the G7 in hate-motivated attacks against the Muslim community of all the G7. This is a top priority. We have to combat hate by making sure we have strong penalties for when someone commits a crime. When there's hate crime that's motivated by extremism, we have to make sure to combat it. The Muslim community, I'm here today. I made time today to make sure we were here to talk about this. It's dedicated in my heart and my experience as a brown person in this country, and I really want to thank Dr. Habiba Mohamud for the work you've done in contributing to the recommendations, the 61 recommendations from the National Council of Canadian Muslims, which I fully endorse. I fully endorse the work that's been done by the NCCM. I also want to add on that in addition to our endorsement, we need legislation that's going to actually enforce this, make those recommendations into law. We also need to make sure our local police forces are actually equipped to deal with hate crime. They have to be able to recognize what hate crime looks like and enforce laws to protect people. We also got to make sure the online space is regulated and make sure those big corporations like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter are actually regulating hate in Canada. That's where their motives are coming from, and we have to crack down on it and make sure they stop.
Thank you. Before I open up for debate, you have issues and speaking on behalf on what our Muslim women or what Muslims are in general are looking at the issues when it comes to Islamophobia and the addressing of that.
Absolutely. First of all, I am so happy, and I was fortunate enough to be part of the NCCM community consultations that was so many, and we could even do that COVID-19 time on virtual. So I took my time from work to be present and really represent the women who are being harassed by the Canadians, a few Canadians, not all Canadians, I mean just a few of them. Now, one thing I will let you tell the crowd is, we know that instead of looking up, taking care of those white supremacists, we have actually been, surveillance have been put on us. as Muslims, not only Muslim women. I always look at my shoulders around. I always, worry for my daughters. We can't even live. I know people who are housebound. Women who are housebound cannot even go, and there was no support for them. What did I do? I was everywhere and providing that support and going to them. I'm happy that those recommendations, I see them actually in the Liberal platform right now, a few of them, and my role when I get elected will be to lead those, whatever the 61 recommendations that were put forward by the NCCM, and I will definitely be the spokesperson that I've always been. I mean, this is not new to me. I will be the champion. I will be the spokesperson. I will be, speaking for the community that, basically, I'll be speaking for myself. Exactly.
Thank you. Well, Doctor mentioned some of the past record, and I want to be very clear and upfront that our party does not have a perfect record when it comes to these issues, and everybody knows that, right? I think everybody knows also that that our leader, Aaron O'Toole, has been very strong and very clear in condemning Islamophobia, in building strong bridges with the Muslim community. Our national campaign chair, Walid Solomon, is a Muslim. We have many Muslim candidates that have helped us strengthen that engagement and inform our party in an ongoing way about how we can build on and strengthen our relationship. And I think folks will notice that when Aaron O'Toole speaks out boldly and fearlessly about these issues of justice and human rights, that people take notice, that he has played a strong role in leading some of these conversations. And look, there's a consensus on many of these issues. There's a consensus on the need to address online hate. There's a consensus on the need to... Thank you.
Mike?
As much as I appreciate Mr. Garnett's participation here, where's Kerry Diotte? That's the biggest question.
Absolutely.
Like, it's nice to hear about the Conservative government's participation and all these great things, but if our representative for this district isn't even here to meet with the Muslim community right now, then when will he be here to meet with the Muslim community?
Thank you. So, Dr. Habiba, go ahead. We have about 30 seconds left on this issue.
Kerry Diotte, I'll add on to what just Blake said. Kerry Diotte has been an absentee representative, and I'm not surprised he is absent from his constituent today. And it is sad, it's a waste of time for the community because they were very ready with questions, and he's not here to respond. The gentleman here cannot actually talk on his behalf. I actually don't even know what he's doing here.
I have a picture.
So, yeah.
We'll just,
Excuse me.
We'll just,
Okay.
out of respect, can we just please remove that? We can't do that.
With,
Folks,
Just on behalf of the two, I'll apologize to Mr. Garnett and on behalf of the Conservative Party.
Sorry.
From the audience, we cannot be making any such gestures.
Sorry, I thought it was a democratic country.
No, it's definitely democratic, but we just have to respect our candidates who are here or who are there to answer our questions. So if I can just respectfully to make sure that
Sure, it
no
won't
such
happen
things
again.
are being done.
Won't
Thanks so
happen
much.
again.
Appreciate it. Mr. Garnett, please respond.
yeah, sure. I'm happy to be here representing the Conservative Party. I'm the Director of Cross-Cultural Engagement for our national campaign. I'm a member of the Shadow Cabinet. I'm the Shadow Minister for International Human Rights and International Development. So these are, like, I have met with Muslim communities and been at many mosques across the country. Kerry Diotte, I believe, is a great representative. And the party asked me to speak because of a lot of the work I've done on some of the particular issues we're going to be talking about, like Uyghurs, like the Middle East. And I'm pleased to bring that. But, I can tell you, Kerry Diotte has been a very strong representative speaking on these issues and many other issues. I know he's working hard and regularly engaged.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. We need to move on. Closing days of Ramadan, we witnessed the incursion of Israeli state agents into Al-Aqsa Mosque. The United Nations further reaffirmed that the international Israel's action to evict and dispossess Palestinians could amount to war crimes. In February 2021, Canada's House of Commons voted overwhelmingly to declare China's treatment of the Uyghurs minority population as genocide. The non-binding motion, which passed 266 to 0, was brought forward by Conservative MPs, supported by all opposition parties and a number of Liberal MPs. Finally, as we reach the 20th anniversary of the invasion of Afghanistan, and as the Taliban have once again seized control of the nation, a humanitarian crisis has been unfolding. Canadians have watched the horror as violence has once again touched the lives of so many vulnerable populations. Canada's role in the Afghanistan crisis is indisputable. And of course, there are many other crises that Canadian Muslims have been watching in Lebanon, in France, in Burma, in Kashmir, and many others. My question is simple. What will you be doing to stand up on international human rights? Mr. Grant, I'll let you walk us through this.
Sure, thank you. And I think if some of the specific situations you've identified, the situation of Palestinians, the situation of Uyghurs, are also the subject of future questions. So maybe I'll just, for the initial point here, we have a very strong international human rights policy more broadly. It commits to creating a requirement that the Foreign Affairs Minister table an annual report on the work of the Government of Canada on human rights issues. It involves the creation of a national body, an international human rights advisory body made up of representatives of different communities. It commits to strong new legislation to prevent the importation of products made from slave labor into Canada. That's a huge problem impacting Uyghur Muslims, is forced labor, slave labor, creating products, tomatoes, cotton, other things that find their way into the Canadian marketplace, making it a criminal offense for people to go abroad and be involved in gross violations of human rights overseas, expanding and strengthening the Magnitsky Act so that we can have targeted sanctions against individuals who are involved in gross violations of human rights, limiting the ability of the government to grant waivers to allow human rights abusers to come to Canada. There is a series of issues that we have proposed as part of our international human rights policy that aside from the particulars of any individual situation, will reorient the government of Canada to have a principled foreign policy that stands up for justice and human dignity on the world stage, and I'm very proud of that policy.
Well, it's certainly something that's been the top of mind in the international perspective for a long time now, not just recently, not just since 2020, but the situation that's taking place across the Middle East, particularly in the Israel-Palestine conflict, is something that Canadians have largely ignored. Both governments, whether they're liberal and conservative, have let sales of weapons to Israel take place, something New Democrats are adamantly want to put to an end. We believe as New Democrats to stop selling guns. New Democrats also want to make sure that the International Criminal Court actually has the teeth and jurisdiction to prosecute folks, especially war criminals who are trying to evade or flee their countries from situations that they've decimated whole countries and communities and are trying to flee them. They should be found. Yeah.
You know, I can just stand here and say guns should be stopped. Of course, they're going to be stopped with me becoming a member of parliament. I have a 10-year graduate studies on people who have been displaced or attacked by conflicts and by climate change. I have the lived experience myself. My mom passed away in a concentration camp when I was born, and I grew up without my mom because of ill-conceived policies that we have seen in some parts of the world. I will definitely be the spokesperson for something that I am an expert at. And when you talk about Palestine, we have spent over, our government has spent over $135 million to help with the Palestinians in terms of making sure their kids go to school. There's public health services. There's also public services, clinics that are available for those people. And one more, just wait, please. Just one minute.
We're going to get into
I know, but we were the first people, the first Western country actually to condemn and oppose settlement building and demolition of the Palestinians' homes in West Bank and East Jerusalem. So I will stop at that, but we can just continue. Yes,
Thank you, Dr.
absolutely.
Dr. Habiba. I know this is a sensitive topic.
It is.
Amongst our community. I am going to take the liberty to change the format for you. I am going to allow 1 or 2 questions on these issues from the audience. If you'd like to stand up especially, just raise your hand. You're more than welcome to ask questions. Please, if you can make sure your question is simple and limited, and then we'll allow each candidate to respond to that question. Go ahead, brother.
Assalamu alaikum.
If you don't mind, just state your name.
So I'm going to just talk some numbers here. So main numbers are reported the pandemic. So the cases in Canada, 1,500,000 to today, 27,000 deaths. That's less than 2%. So if we go to the global speaking, so we have 223 million deaths and a little bit, 4,223,000,000 cases, and we have 4 million deaths. That's the same pattern, consistent pattern, 2%. So in the media and from all elected officials, we hear deaths. That's 2%. Not a single official in the media speak about the 98%. Now we don't need to be a genius to tell that you have 98% chance to recover from the virus. That's not said in the media. 98% have recovered from the virus.
What's the question?
Sorry, my apologies. We are speaking on the issues when we talk about the violence against the Muslims in Palestine too. You're more than welcome. Your question is valid. I will definitely make sure you ask your questions on the COVID issues at the end of it. MashaAllah. But thank you so much for that. Any questions on the issues when we talk about Palestine or the violence of issues on what is happening today or anything else in international affairs? Is there any questions? Please, brother, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is to Ms. Habiba.
Yes.
Obviously, to present myself. My name is Osama. I come from Syria, and I'm sure most of people here, either Arabs or Muslims, and even non-Arabs or Muslims, they know about Syria nowadays. You're liberal?
Yes.
Yeah, I was stating. I wasn't questioning. And we all know, I don't know to what extent everybody knows that. I'm not going to underestimate their intelligence, but the left. And we all know that most of our part of the world actually have suffered from the left. I'm not saying I'm reflecting on that here in Canada. It's different, obviously. It's not that extreme. But we suffered from that. And we all know about it, or those who have been interested to know about it. Now, you said something about Mr. Trudeau and the white supremacy, and he called them terrorists. We have different kind of terrorism as well, which I don't need to go through now. But the same Mr. Trudeau that you said he's the first who, I don't know how, I didn't hear it myself, I'm going to research it, if he said it really, if he was the only one who said it.
Mr. Brother, if I can actually get your question, please.
I'm going to get to the question. But he is the same one who we all, or most of us saw it, who, he showed his appreciation of the dictatorship in certain parts of the world. No need to mention it, it's obvious to everybody. So now my question here, you as a Muslim, as a hijabi, as you said, what made you actually join the liberal, not another kind of
Brother, I need to really ask you to get to your question, please.
Yeah, that was my question. If I want to choose her as a representative to me, I want to know why she joined. If I'm going to vote liberal, I want to know why she joined in the first place liberal, if I may understand that.
Okay, I think the questions again we're just trying to see over here is to make sure we're looking at the issues that the Muslims are facing and what the government stance would be addressing the issues against violence against Muslims when we talk about Kashmir, Lebanon, and everything else. So in terms of Dr. Habiba, for any other candidate, for Mr. Garnett or for Blake, why are they running for their parties? Valid question to be asked at the end of it. Absolutely. We're just saying, are there any questions related to this specific topic before actually getting to the debate?
She can answer at the end, no problem.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Just but Mr. Blake, if you want to just, I'm going to leave the floor a little bit open to you on these issues in terms of when we're talking about violence against Muslims, or looking at international issues that we're looking at too. We mentioned the Palestine issue, we mentioned the Kashmir issue, we're looking at the Afghanistan and what's happening there too. Blake, a few words.
Well, these conflicts are not happening in a vacuum. Like, it's not just affecting these countries. It's actually built up largely by a history of trying to resource extract these communities. And it's been really large global companies who have gone scot-free on lots of this stuff, who've went into countries, destabilized democracies, upheld regimes that have harmed people, as you folks all know. You know, we all know of someone, whether it's your families, who may be part of the international community, who may be seeking relief, who know of the experience that they've had. And that experience has led them to flee, has led them to go away from the homes that they've loved and been a part of. And it's creating a whole nother kind of problem of dysphoria. And Canada has a role to play. We should be welcoming folks from countries that Canada itself has harmed. We've harmed those communities, and we should have a role in recovery.
Your comments?
Yes. When it comes to what are we going to do about the Palestinians, first of all, it was so heartbreaking to see little children being killed in those massacres. And as a mother, you can imagine how I feel about that. As someone who has children, you can imagine how I feel about that. However, we have a government that we can talk to and listen. For example, they have made tremendous leadership on the Rohingya issue. We have put forward and called the Muslim Chinese in China, and we expressed our concerns about the Muslim Chinese in China. We have also coordinated, put quite pressure on the international government and allies to be with us on condemning those actions that were put on the Chinese Muslims.
I just have to start on that. I mean, sadly, the government's failure and it brings me no pleasure saying this, but the government has been an atrocious failure when it comes to confronting the Uyghur genocide. Justin Trudeau and his cabinet abstained, refused to even vote on the motion that Conservatives put forward on the Uyghur genocide. All the other opposition parties were united. Some individual members of the government did, but the leadership has to come from cabinet. The government still refuses to acknowledge that genocide. The government refuses to speak out against it. The government has also refused to bring in the kind of supply chain legislation we needed. The government's response is, we need an investigation. Look, the government of China is not going to allow an impartial investigation. They're not even allowing an impartial investigation on COVID-19. They're certainly not going to allow international investigators to come look around these concentration camps. We heard testimony at committee of systematic sexual violence, of men being taken from homes and put in concentration camps, and then other men from other communities being put in those Uyghur homes of all kinds of horrors. Recognizing this genocide and acting on it is the least the government could do. We need a government that will do this, and I'm prepared to work with other parties that want to do it.
What's happening in China to Muslims there, the Uyghur population, is genocide. It amounts to genocide. And if we as Canadians don't uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the international conventions we've agreed to, we are no better. In many ways, Canada has its own dark history with grappling with what genocide looks like, and we have lessons that we should be learning. When we intern people the way that China has, when the government doesn't act to ensure that our global partners are enforcing strict penalty to the great abuse that Muslims in China are facing right now, reflects on us as Canadians. People in countries look to Canada for guidance for so many issues, particularly the moral compass that guides us. When we allow atrocities to take place internationally, we allow them to take place in Canada.
Dr. Habiba.
My leader actually has put over $288 million to help the Rohingya community. I have a question for my friend here. When the Conservatives have cut programs from the refugee, from the Palestine government-assisted refugees, what are you promising now that you're going to assist, help, and prevent genocide, and you are there for the people? How can you even talk like that in front of these people that you have actually failed. Your Kerry Diotte guy, I have taken caseloads to him concerning about people who actually are traumatized because of what is happening in Palestine. And he never responded to me. He never responded to his constituents. He never responded to anybody for anything. As he's absent today, he's always been absent. What are you, how can you respond to that?
The question I sort of hits on a couple different points. In terms of the question about refugee, I'm not sure what's being referred to there in terms of cuts. Our proposals involve, in fact, the expansion and the streamlining of refugee processes, lifting caps on private sponsorship, supporting more joint sponsorship programs, allowing more Canadians to sponsor vulnerable refugees to come to Canada. There have been many complaints from those involved in private refugee sponsorship about red tape, about significant delays, and about the fact that private sponsorship is capped. We have a detailed plan around reforming the refugee system to make it work better, to strengthen private and joint sponsorship. I think those kinds of policies will really matter for those who are looking to be able to come to Canada. Now, I think we may be coming to the Palestinian issue later on as well, but just to say, I think there are some misconceptions about the Conservative position on that, insofar as the Conservative Party is very supportive of a two-state solution. And in government, we were actively engaged with the Palestinian Authority working to build capacity. When I was in Ramallah, personally, I visited a security lab that was funded under a Conservative government, a security lab run by the Palestinian Authority. And so our platform talks specifically about continuing and building on partnership, building capacity with the Palestinian Authority so that we can work towards that two-state solution.
Thanks so much, Mr. Garnett. We had one question from the crowd over here. If you understand, would you like to ask a question, please?
So I have been following, mostly the different parties' reaction always to the Palestinian crisis. And what I find interesting is that the NDP seems to be the most kind of standing for justice to the Palestinians when I look at the statements by Jagmeet Singh. What I find probably shocking is the liberal stance and the conservative stance. The liberals, when they make statements in regard to the violence against Palestinians, it's always, we are sympathizing with the Palestinians, but Israel has the right to, kill and to, bomb and yeah. And so I find that a little bit, troubling. If you stand for justice, address it and talk about the victims, and don't stand for the country that is actually killing on a daily basis, and don't stand at the reaction that when the Palestinians react, we just get focused on the reaction, of the Palestinian. The same thing for the UCP. And I follow Garnett a lot, and I do respect you, and I do appreciate the work you do. But also I do find you, of course, a strong supporter of the State of Israel. And this obsession with Hamas is not Palestine. Hamas represents only a segment of the Palestinian population. And whenever there is a conflict between Hamas and Israel, we always tend to put the blame on Hamas as if Hamas is the one instigating the violence. But like the recent ones, it was Israel who instigated the conflict recently by storming into the Aqsa Mosque. So if you want to be pro-justice, you have to be pro-justice with Muslims across all the contexts, not just picky, I'm supporting, I am with the Uyghurs, I am with the Kashmiris, but when it comes to the Palestinians, I don't take that justice stand. So that's my concern with the two main parties.
I will make a comment on this. Here is what O'Toole said. I stand with Israel yesterday. I stand with Israel today. And I stand with Israel always. And that's all he said. He didn't say anything about the Palestinians. Now, to go back to your question, if any of these candidates, Kerry Diotte is obviously absent, but if any of these candidates stood up with the community in Parliament, South Park, for everything that we have done, for the Kashmiri, for the Palestinians, for the Rohingyas, for the Muslim Chinese, if anybody else has done for the indigenous people, perhaps Blake might have done that. For anybody who has stood up with the minorities who are being subjugated, as you said, outside and inside, is me. And that's why I put my name forward.
Well, thank you. I just want to say again, we are committed to a two-state solution, and we want to work towards that. And I don't expect that we will agree 100% of the time in terms of the way forward. I will say it's not about obsessing about Hamas. It's about recognizing though that that in the context of the situation in Gaza, the Palestinian people, it's out of concern for the Palestinian people that we recognize that they are victims of a terrorist organization that they did not elect, and that we recognize as well that if you look at the situation in the West Bank, problems that were emerging there, and sensitive issues that required action, required engagement, and then I think what we saw is Hamas doing a power play contrary to the Palestinian Authority and trying to insert itself into what was happening by launching rockets. So I think there were a number of different things happening. I think you have to recognize the differences. We're committed to engaging with the Palestinian Authority, working to build that capacity, working towards a two-state solution, and working to support the development of democratic institutions that will preserve the security and the human rights of Palestinian people from all kinds of threats, including from threats from organizations like Hamas.
Well, I certainly agree with Brother's question. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I totally agree. I completely 100% agree that justice in North America is justice in the Middle East, is justice in Europe, is justice in China. When we look at the atrocities taking place against Palestinians today, they're being kicked out of homes. Like something so basic to someone's safety, their house, their private home where they raise children, where they have a life. Indigenous people in this land, we've experienced that. We know how it feels to be pushed and pushed and pushed until there's outbreak in war, until ultimately we're subjugated to the fringes of society. My mom, for example, grew up in a shack. She ate soup, cold soup, from day to day just to make a living, and she got $1 a day for milking cows. And she did that, and she worked hard, just like so many people who come to Canada. Everyone here has done. You know exactly what it feels like to be hungry and pushed out of your homes. And this type of justice we're asking for is human dignity, peace and security, something that should be guaranteed to everyone, no matter if you're Palestinian. And that's what I totally agree with you on.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Appreciate it. Thanks so much. We're going to get into our last half of these questions. Dr. Diotte will definitely get a chance to get on the end of it. We're going to talk about policies-wise and what is happening with a policy that is something that is significantly affecting our community at large and as Canadian Muslims. This is about Bill 21. And for those who may not be aware what Bill 21 is, the Quebec government has legalized religious discrimination against those who wear any religious garment. I'm going to keep this very in simplistic terms. However, if you think this doesn't affect all Canadians, we are forgetting what the Charter means for us all. In policing the personal choices of Canadians, in their dress and their various and beautiful ways in which they express their deepest human desire to transcend and to find their own personal peace, we're losing freedoms that our predecessors struggled hard to achieve. The terrible scars of restricting the spiritual, linguistic, and cultural heritage of Indigenous peoples of these lands are still in the process of being healed and reconciled. Have we forgotten how adamant people were that the potlatch was dangerous to Canadians? Have we not learned how these impositions on the rights of human beings have devastating effects on people's sense of freedom and pride? How is this that now Canadians are going to be chastised by the United Nations for taking part in institutionalized discrimination? So my question is this. We've seen how systemic discrimination is in a variety of places. In our laws, institutions like CRA, CSIS, CBSA, Canadian Bird Service Agencies. What steps will you take to rout systemic discrimination and Islamophobia within Canada? Dr. Habiba.
Well, I have already taken steps by providing my input on CRA issue, on Muslims who are wearing hijab, but I think you've raised quite a number of questions there. First of all, I will get back to the details, but as a Muslim woman who wears a hijab, I think it is unacceptable that I would be denied a job in a place called Quebec simply because I'm wearing my hijab. after Canada invested in me for over 15 years of my education. It's sad. As the Prime Minister has said several times, I hope that in the aftermath of recent attack in London, we will reflect from what the impact of Bill 21 is on those who wear their religious identity. For example, women who wear hijab, the Sikh who wear turbans, and the people of the Jewish people who also have their religious identity. It's unacceptable, and it has no place in Canada.
Yeah, I disagree with Bill 21. I've tabled a petition on it in the House of Commons, actually, working with NCCM on that petition. I want to say at the same time, the federal government has failed in many respects to lead within their own areas of jurisdiction in terms of confronting instances of systemic racism that require action. I would say, for example, that despite a lot of discussion about different issues, we still have a federal public service that's not as representative as it should be of the diversity of Canada. We had an instance of a public servant who was disciplined or told, if I remember right, told to keep quiet in the midst of criticizing the Prime Minister over blackface. So we've had instances of people being silenced and a lack of representation. Our party has written to the government and pushed on the issue of CRA, for example, and addressing concerns about disproportionate audits targeting the Muslim community by CRA. So there are a broad range of issues that need to happen, and I think we need action and leadership from the federal government.
Mr. Blake.
Bill 21 is dangerous for our country. A free democratic society cannot tolerate such discrimination like Bill 21. You mentioned the potlatch, for example. The potlatch is an indigenous ceremony, been here for 100,000 years, about sharing and giving to one another, making sure every family, even the poorest, have what they need. That's what the potlatch was, and it was banned. It was banned here for the better part of this country's history. And Indigenous people, our message to everyone, especially those who face this ban, is continue to wear hijab. Continue to be who you are. This is a free country, a country my ancestors fought for tooth and nail, and a freedom, a fundamental freedom we will never surrender, and you should never surrender to. It's who you are, it's who we are, and we're a society that should embrace our differences because we have so much more to give when we have a diversified experience. And in terms of actions, you spoke a little bit about what the New Democrats might do. We would, of course, review immediately the Canada Human Rights Act to see how we can make sure it's in compliance with Bill T21 and ultimately recommend its ending.
Thank you, Mr. Blake.
Repeal.
I will remind all candidates and this crowd the fact that NCCM has been successful to be knocking down parts of this bill. Our work remains, and we will be taking it to appeal. So we have been in the Supreme Court of Canada, been knocking down parts of this. We've been successful. And our fight will continue on. But it's significantly important to recognize what this bill is, and not just the people of Quebec, but also the people of Canada. To use such a clause, a notwithstanding clause, at any given time, it is un-Canadian-like, and it is something that cannot be allowed. I am going to open the floor for debate on this issue, and I'll start with Mr. Blake. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. And just to continue that last point, we would continue to make sure that we advance the protections of all persons who wish to express their individual identities, whether it's under the Constitution or especially our Charter on Rights and Freedoms. Something we often forget is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms expands not just to Canadian citizens, but to all persons, including those persons outside our boundaries. And if we don't uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms just in our own community, we can't be expected to uphold them anywhere else. And so I do think that Canada has a long ways to go to ensure something like the notwithstanding clause cannot be used as this shield to protect racism. That's what this is. Quebec is being racist when they want to make sure only non-Muslim folks work in the public service.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I had the main comments. I think maybe I'll just add that Conservatives have been very engaged in studies that have happened in Parliament on issues around policing and a broad range of other concerns. Procurement, making sure that procurement is inclusive. We hear many concerns about how small or minority-owned businesses don't have the same access to government procurement. So our platform speaks across the board, really, of needing to confront all of these various issues. There's not one strategy for addressing all instances of systemic racism. I think you have to look at the individual institutions and the individual institutional dynamics, and certainly this is something that we've been working on across the board.
It's sad that our leaders actually champion or spearhead all these hijabi issue. When Hapa himself, as I said before, took a Muslim woman who is wearing niqab to court, and she could not swear in her citizen event. It was sad to watch that, and that has never left me. The same people are telling us that they're actually fighting for human rights and that they are really protecting the Charter of Rights. When it comes to the NDPs, they can promise whatever they can promise because they will not form the next government anyway. It's a two-way race. So you can promise me heaven and tell me I can actually take you to heaven, and even if you don't work hard for it. That's what the NDPs are doing, and that's what the Conservatives are doing. And so, as a hijab wearer, I am actually going to fight for the rights of minority women, especially.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Dr. Habiba.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. I have reached to the end of my question that I wanted to ask you, and thank you for being patient. The floor is now up open to the audience, and they're going to be asking some questions. I know, brother, I'll get to you, just brother, do 2 seconds here. We want to make sure that your question does get answered. If you just simply reiterate your question in a very simple sentence. I think if I can recall, you were just asking Dr. Habiba, why is she running for the Liberals? Was that what your question was, just to make sure?
She had the option, obviously, among all. Obviously, I understand that she wouldn't go to Conservative. I get it. Why not? No. Okay. No,
We'll put the belief structure to the side. The question is that I think you're just asking for Dr. Kick.
Because actually, just to make it clear, I'm opposing to it. Clear.
Okay.
All right, let's make it clear.
But don't oppose me.
Well, you said he is your leader in a way, so I cannot.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
But so that's my point. As I said, just to wrap it up again, just to remind the people also of my question.
Okay.
I'm talking about the left itself. The left in general, as a left opposing the right, all right? Back in our countries, we suffered. Even you, in your own country, what you were saying that the concentration camps, wherever it is, it all came from the left.
Okay.
Again, I'm not saying that Trudeau is going to make a concentration camp here.
All right, brother. I think we need to sort of sum it up. So, I mean, I truly appreciate your comments and what you're saying. I think, Dr. Habiba, I think in a very simple stance, if you want to sort of very simply, if you can answer that, what your stance is and why do you represent yourself for the Liberals and what they do. I think that's a simple thing I can say at this point.
Represent us, Muslims. Now we're talking about Muslims. This is a Muslim society. How does that represent?
Dr. Habiba.
Okay, so I will share a story with you. My leader was asked a while back, it was 2019, he was in a town hall, and he was asked, why do you constantly talk for Muslims? Why do you care about them that much? And that person was really aggressive on him. I can give you the clip. He said, because nobody speaks for them, I have to speak for them. Right? That's exactly what he said. We believe we are the ones who actually created a department for inclusivity, diversity, and tolerant department. We have a whole ministry that is focusing on that. And there's nothing else they talk about except empowering us. It is only under his government that we have 3 ministers, Minister Monsef, Minister Hussein, and Minister Omar. We have 3 ministers, and inshallah, I will be the 4th one. Thank you.
If Can you just state your name, please, just to make sure that you state your name?
My name's Haroon. I had a question for the MP. So Michael Cooper just a little while back was actually disciplined for him making comments regarding a Muslim person making comments about a link between conservatism and racism. How can you come here and say that the Conservative Party is working against racism if your own MP who is now running for re-election is being racist?
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Respectfully, sir, I don't agree with your characterization of those particular events. What happened in that instance was it was a discussion about the question of, I think, what had motivated a particular act of white supremacist terrorism, and in the context of trying to make an argument about understanding what that person's motivations were. One of our MPs read from a manifesto that person wrote. Now, that MP apologized for it. He recognized that that was an insensitive thing. But the purpose of that committee hearing was to study questions of what constitutes, of how we effectively respond to online hate. So I would submit to you that when you're trying to study instances of online hate, you need to look at that online hate and understand what is being said so that you can know how to confront it effectively. Now, it was insensitive, I agree, to read it in the context of a committee hearing, but your characterization of that event as if he was somehow supporting those words is not at all true. He was criticizing those words while he was pointing out of the words. He should not have been kicked out, and he was not kicked out because he was... we can have a dialogue afterwards. I'm happy to go back and forth on this, but it was an insensitive way of communicating in terms of reading those words. But I think, if you go back and look at the context of the event, what was happening was it was a discussion about how to best confront online hate. And in the context of that discussion, certain examples were used of instances of online hate as part of that study. Thank you.
We're going to move on to that question. Just say I'll make a comment. I know about this incident very well. I was involved in that incident. So rest assured, I think we're good to go. The brother over here, sorry, just...
My name is Ken Robinson.
Oh, just 2 seconds.
Thank you. My name is Ken Robinson. My question is for Mr. Genoui. We spoke a little bit about this incident. There's a rather famous... Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. There's another pretty famous photograph that I could have shown of our MP, Kerry Diotte, with his hand around Faith Goldie, who's a known white supremacist, rebel media commentator, and he was never sanctioned by your leader. He was never held to account for this association of his with white supremacists. And this is factual, and it's not disputable. I'd just like to know if you have any comments on this.
Thanks so much.
Yes, I just think, respectfully, the timelines are important. Since Faith Goldie has come out and started making the kinds of comments that you're referring to, no Conservatives have been in any way photographed with her, doing events with her, anything like that. There are some instances of relatively old photos prior to her making these kinds of public statements. And I think it is a little bit misleading to say, there's a photo from prior to someone coming out and making those statements. I mean, clearly, following some of the comments she made, none of us would have those kinds of associations.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Garnett. We had a question from the back here. Just so long.
I just have a question.
Oh, just give it.
I have a big family. I got a big voice.
Okay.
For UCP.
We just want to make sure the people online have hear that fantastic voice.
For UCP, you say that you're in favor of a two-state solution, but yet you do not use the terminology, like the right words, as Palestine. You still continue to use Palestinian Authority. We don't want an authority. We want Palestine. And how can your leader said that he will move the embassy to Jerusalem. This will not only hurt the Palestinians of Palestine, but it will hurt all Muslims. For the liberals, You say that you have programs that take our children to school, but at the Ayat, do you think it's double standard when you give money for the kids to go to school and at the same time you sell arms to block the roads going to school? And for NDP, will you move the embassy to Jerusalem, and will you stop selling arms to people that create genocide?
Thank you for that question. So I've been to Ramallah. I was part of a parliamentary delegation. I've actually met with President Mahmoud Abbas as well as the foreign minister. I use the term Palestinian Authority because that's my understanding of the term that they use in terms of identifying themselves. But I'm just saying when I meet with folks and they say we're the Palestinian Authority, I'll be very clear again about my desire, our party's desire, to work towards the existence of a two-state solution, two democratic, pluralist states with strong institutions that are collaborating, that are trading with Canada and with each other. That's the vision. That's the goal that we want to work towards. And there was a second part to your question for me. I'm sorry. Jerusalem. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. I don't want to look like I'm avoiding it. So. We've been very clear that the policy of having an embassy in Jerusalem does not presume anything of what would constitute a final status agreement. The creation of a final status agreement clearly needs to be established through negotiations between the parties. The fact of the matter is Israel's governing institutions are in Jerusalem. That's where the Knesset is. That's where its bureaucracy is headquarters. That's where it is. So how do we effectively engage, including engaging in the cause of peace, when we're not present where its governing institutions are? I mean, in any other country, every other country around the world, we have our embassy where the governing institutions are. That doesn't presume what a final status agreement would look like. That's just about saying how do we be effective as a country? Why would we not have our embassy in the place where the governing institutions of that country are?
We had an issue. We had a question for the brother. Sorry, just give 2 seconds, Mark. Here, we had a question previously on just on COVID. Okay, we just need to make sure the question is very small and simple.
No, it's a comment about our UCP.
No.
Yeah. I think she had questions for the three of us.
Yeah.
They didn't get the answer.
Yeah.
Oh, do they have questions? Sorry. Do you have questions? Or?
We just want to respond to that.
Okay, no worries. Give me 2 seconds here if you don't mind. Go ahead, Doctor. Sorry, do you have a returning question on that or no?
No, she addressed the question to all three of you.
Oh, my apologies. Dr. Habiba and then Blake.
So thank you so much for your question. My boss, as you said, Trudeau, believes in two-state solution. He also is not going to take the embassy to Jerusalem. Now, I demonstrated with you on the issues of guns, right at South Park Parliament. And that is the reason why I'm putting my name forward. Can you give me the vote so that I can fight for you at Ottawa?
I want to know if you're going to stop selling arms to Israel.
That's exactly what I'm saying. There is no perfection. There's no perfection. There's no perfection in what Trudeau is doing. That's why I'm putting my name forward, and I'm going to fight against that. Send me to Ottawa.
Thank you so much for the question. Regardless if you elect me or not, New Democrats will fight to stop arms sales to Israel. Simply put, we are opposed to the violence that's happening there. Palestinians are being kicked out of homes. Like, it's a terrible situation. I don't have to tell you folks that. But New Democrats, just know, me included, we're with you. We want to stand with you. We will not recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Every act is political. We just heard from the Conservative representative, just going there is an act of recognition of their legitimacy. That is in itself political. So we have to make sure that we don't do things like that, especially if it's going to create more conflict. So I am agreeing with you, 100%.
So it's a comment on the UCP answer. And if you, yes, a comment to him, and if you can answer the comment. So quick reminder to the history: in the early 20th century, England, which is Great Britain, did occupy the land, handed over to Israeli people in 1948. So that's a fact. So by recognizing the two-state solution, you are recognizing a criminal country that is legit. So the question is, why recognizing a two-state solution, at the same time you're recognizing that that country is legit, which is not legit. So that's why I'm giving you a quick reminder in the history that in the early 20th century, the land was occupied by Great Britain, the coalition, France, Great Britain, and the United States, handed over against the people will to the Israeli people. That's a fact. That's not true. So why recognizing the two-state solution? If you do that, you are recognizing a criminal country that as a legit country.
Okay, I don't want to project opinion. It would be good to have maybe more dialogue to understand what your suggestion here is. I mean, I would say it's important to recognize that there is a very deep and long-standing connection, thousands of years, between the Jewish people and that piece of land, and that's not to take away from the fact that there are others who live there as well. But I believe in the principle of the right of self-determination of peoples in their homelands, and it's not unique to that piece of land that there are conflicts over territory in terms of historic presence, and that's why there has to be negotiation and compromise. But why do I believe in a two-state solution? Because there are two peoples, the Jewish people and the Palestinian people, that have long-standing, important historic connections as well as contemporary presence in that piece of territory. And that's why there has to be negotiation, dialogue, and a peaceful settlement that hopefully also includes things like shared access to holy sites and other forms of collaboration that will be beneficial to both peoples.
Thank you so much. I think we got to push anyone for the front. Sorry, this brother, sorry, Sister Ariel first.
Salam everyone, my name is Randa Hajawi and I'm just a Canadian citizen here representing myself, and I just have a question. I'm sorry, I came after you introduced yourself, so it's unfortunate that Kerry Diotte did not make the time to come meet us today. I took time off work on Sunday to come here and meet all of you. My question is straightforward. Do you support the human rights for Palestinian people? Would your government uphold the United Nations resolution for Palestinians? Our Palestinian Canadians who live here, do they have the right to speak and criticize the Israeli government without being accused of anti-Semitism? What would you say about that?
Sorry, is this question just only Mr. Burnett or to all three of them?
Okay, so I got three distinct questions in there. Do I believe in human rights for Palestinians? Absolutely. Do I agree with every resolution passed by the General Assembly with respect to Israel and Palestine? No, I don't. Do I think that criticism of Israel is in every case anti-Semitism? Absolutely not. I think it's very legitimate to criticize policies of the Israeli government. Many Israelis, many Jews in Israel, as well as non-Jews who are Israelis, routinely criticize the policies of their government. Israel is a democracy that subjects itself to internal criticism, and there are cases where the Israeli Supreme Court makes decisions that limit or constrain the actions of the government. I think when in any case statements are made that delegitimize the idea of national self-determination for a particular people, in any case, right? If we said that people in a particular country don't have the same right to national self-determination in their homeland that another people, that would, I think, cross a different kind of line. That's different from criticizing policies of the government. So I think that distinction is important.
Thanks so much, Ricardo. Please.
Hi, my name is Mohamud Sadiq. I just want to remind everyone here that we are not just voting for you individuals. Whatever you tell us today as individuals, that's very good. We believe in what you believe in. But we are voting not for you. We are voting for your government. And that's important to recognize, that we are not voting just for an individual. We are voting for a government deciding how this government will rule for the next 4 years. Now, I'm very politically naive, but what I have seen is that politicians, the people who stand up to represent the governments at the election time, would say what people want to hear, because this is what they want vote for. What they do afterwards is in none of your control. Am I right? This is the reality. As individual MPs, even if you were elected, what your government is going to do is not in your control. And we have a curse in this country that we need to follow the party line. We can't go against the party line, whatever that party line is. And that bothers me. That you would say, we do this, and your government will not do it, and then you have to toe the party line. Now, I want to understand, how are your parties actually different in their philosophical stand about what makes them liberal, conservatives, and NDP? And I'm going to suggest that before we vote, we don't vote on what these people are saying, but we vote on the past experiences of what these parties have done and what have they accomplished.
Well, I certainly agree with your comments related to how I've highly encouraged everyone here to look into our party's platform. Look into our voting record. You'll know and you'll find that New Democrats have always tried our best to fight and push the government to do the right thing, whether it was condemning China and the persecution of Muslims in China, or whether or not it's been the conflict in Palestine. We've been adamant in our position, and my colleagues across the country, New Democratic candidates and members of Parliament, have also been strong in their position on this. New Democrats don't have the same party structure. We're largely free to make our own decisions on many things, and the party whip doesn't have the same kind of role that the party whips for these two parties do. And so it's different. But the record is so important, I agree. Please look at the voting records of these issues, and you'll see the New Democrats have been with the Muslim community on so many issues, not just here, but across the globe. Not to any credit to myself.
I agree with brother. Yes, we have to really vote wisely. We have to look at the platforms of each and every party and the leaders. We have demonstrated that we have been there for the Muslim community in this country. When I first came here, there was chaos because we were under the rule of the conservatives. The conservatives were in power. I could not even bring my own family here with me as an international student because of immigration issues that were really being unfair to me because I was a Muslim, period. So, and there's always, if you know the Liberal Party, they are the ones who actually opened the doors for non-European individuals to actually come here and be part of the Canadian society.
A lot of credit is being taken by the Liberals. It's actually John Diefenbaker, Conservative Prime Minister, first Prime Minister from Western Canada, who substantially removed racial discrimination in our immigration system. Look, we have a great multicultural society here. That's a matter of political consensus, and let's celebrate the political consensus around multiculturalism rather than trying to drive artificial wedges where they don't exist. On the issue of party discipline, I think there is too much party discipline, especially in terms of what Canadians see. But the other side to that is there is robust debate that happens within our parties in caucus meetings and in other private environments, and there's opportunities for individual MPs to champion particular issues that are important to them. So I'm not going to say that what you said isn't true, but there's kind of two sides to it in terms of the tension that exists. You asked about party philosophy. I think that's a very important question. So conservatives believe, I think maybe uniquely from the other parties, that we need to be cautious about giving government too large or powerful a role in people's lives. Conservatives recognize there's a role for government, but also that the fundamental strength of society comes from strong families, strong community groups, strong individuals. And that government often acts best when they act not alone, but in partnership with civil society, which is why, for instance, on the refugee issue, we've championed more joint sponsorship, more private sponsorship, more partnership between government and the private sector instead of the government doing things kind of entirely on their own.
Thank you so much. I need to move to one last question, unfortunately. We are really running out of time. We're pushing it. Sheikh, please.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I gotta tell you, conservative knew who to send to the Muslim community. Mr. Garnett, you're a talented individual. You work in human rights concern and so on. But I gotta tell you, most of our community was waiting for Mr. Diotte. So in the last election, I was still the Imam, sorry to misintroduce. This is Imam Mohamud Omar, Imam of Rashid Mosque. As well this year, I serve as the president of Edmonton councils around Edmonton as well for the Imams. A lot of our community members, they were really expecting Mr. Diotte. And it's just, I know we're past that, but it is just, very disappointing not for him to come, and appreciate your coming. You exactly know what to say, and so on. You're well educated for that. So one of the things that really bothered me here, this is the mosque in his area. Once a week, which is our one-day ceremony, we almost 4,000 to 5,000 Muslims here, voters in his area, yet that he does not show up. This is really, it will bother everybody. I know a lot of our Muslim brothers here and sisters, they vote conservative. Our Muslim brothers here and sisters, some of them, or a lot of numbers that I heard, they vote conservative. They voted for Mr. Diotte and so on. But for him first, skipping here or apologizing or so on right before the debate, this is a big hit. This is number one. I will just come to the questions and to be mostly political accurate about it. Why the parties don't work together? I'll tell you from my experience. My constituency area is Michael Cooper and so on. The parties, the problem is when you go to the conservative now, Michael Cooper is the one elected here. When I go to him with my problem, you know what? The common thing is, because the liberal is the one in the government, and they're not going to answer my things because it's just, they want the liberal to look very bad in front of, conservative and so on. And if it's the same thing as the opposite, if we got the liberal as well here and it's, conservative government, they will be saying the same things. Why there is no specific agenda, especially when it's concerned about, nationwide, something like immigrations. Why they do not work with one another without preference? Thank you very much.
So I think Sheikh is really just asking, why can't you all sing kumbaya and all work together on the issues that really plague society?
Absolutely.
Dr. Habiba, why don't you go first?
I will. That's why I'm going back to the brother's question. The individual that is running for election really matters. When you hear of Kerry Diotte here, and he does not take community issues to where they are supposed to be, that is really individual. Ideally, they are supposed to be working together. The role of that office is to represent everybody in the riding, and it has three roles. One, to attend to the residents' issues. Two, to make law. Three, to actually be an oversight. That is the role of that office. If the individual chooses not to represent you because he wants to look, the liberals to look bad or the conservatives to look, it's an individual issue and you kick him out.
Thank you, Habiba. Mr. Blake?
I think it's a great question. New Democrats, we actually invited the liberals to work with us throughout the pandemic. We have, and I think in many ways we pushed, for example, doubling CERB. We made sure rental assistance was there. We made sure supports were there for Canadians. I am today, as I was before the election, in favor of cooperating with the minority liberal government to make sure we get through this, to get through the pandemic so our families don't lose out on supports. I'm nervous for when just in a few weeks, many of our benefits that are currently supporting families will be gone. CERB will be gone. Interest rates will kick back in. These things are going to happen, whether we like it or not. So I agree with you. I want to see more nonpartisanship for critical issues like immigration, like peace across the world, not just here in Canada, to make sure hate crime is defined, yeah, etc.
Thank you. And I'll certainly share your feedback with Kerry. I do want to say, and it hasn't been mentioned yet, the issue of the human rights of the Crimean Tatars, which is in the kind of Russian-occupied part of Ukraine. The first motion Kerry put forward was on recognizing the genocide that happened against Crimean Tatars and standing up for their human rights. So that's one area I know among many where Kerry in particular has been very active, and I'm sure he'd be happy to share more with you, and I can follow up on that. But on the other question of working together, there's a saying in journalism: if it bleeds, it leads. And one of the frustrating points for me is that there are some of those instances of cooperation that happen in Parliament, and they rarely get covered because they're not as bloody, they're not as exciting if you're trying to set up the narrative. I could say on international human rights issues, I have worked a lot with people in other parties on putting those issues forward, and give a lot of credit to some of the backbench members of the Liberal caucus on the Uyghur genocide issue. Of course, I think the cabinet failed. I think the government leadership is important, but there were some very courageous individual members that were able to help us push those forward, and we try to build those bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Garnet. Very guys, we have two more questions over here. We'll have one. Brother, do you have any question? Please, you go ahead and ask. I'm just going to ask you to make sure you just take your mask down and you just pass over to. Okay.
My question is very simple, and I'm just directing all of you. One question actually is bothering me for all my life is the Palestinian issue. And since I was in high school, this issue of two states and we support Palestinian, I was listening and nothing has been reached so far. You mentioned it actually, you just come back from Ramallah. And the news I'm always hearing is bothering me. There's millions of Palestinians who are living all over the places in Europe, North America. Nobody can go back to his house. 2 generations maybe they grew up here. And a guy who just left from New York is just taking houses from there and kicking out from Palestinian. So my question is, what's your opinion, the Palestinians who are willing to go back to their country, what is your plan? How are you going to support those people?
I know we've talked a lot about on the Palestinian issues and the issues that the Palestinians are facing. I'll give the chance for all three of you to respond. So it's okay. For you to respond to that too. But Mr. Garnet, I think the question goes back to you again. Just quickly, just touch base. I know you've talked about this a bit, but you just quickly touch base again on the two-state solution and for those who need to go back into Palestine, how they can.
Well, I think the gentleman was referring specifically to some of the discussion around Sheikh Jarrah, and I will say that is an example of where you have people on within the Israeli community who are advocating one position, but you also have the Israeli Supreme Court that is that is taking in some cases different positions. So there's that ongoing question of how to resolve a particular land dispute in that case. I think what your question points to as well, though, is that how do we move forward, right? How do we get towards that two-state solution? And there's the question of land and borders and access to sites and these kinds of things, and that's very important. But I think we also need to work on building up relationship, building up the kind of infrastructure of peaceful coexistence. So let's talk about what Canada can do, right? Because Canada's not going to be the one likely. I mean, maybe we'll be the one that facilitates the big deal, but more than likely it's going to happen through direct dialogue between the parties. But what Canada can do is, I think, support programs around dialogue, around peaceful coexistence. And I know one of the things that was striking to me when I visited the Palestinian territories is how in recent years it's become harder and harder to have that people-to-people interaction between those different communities, especially in the most tense areas. I mean, it's obvious, really. I mean, but when there's a security situation, it becomes that much harder to have that dialogue. But I think Canada can work on playing a role facilitating that.
Thank you, Dr. Habiba.
Yeah, that's a great question. The two-state solution and so many other proposals have been forwarded. And obviously, the issue is more complicated than just simple fix. There is no simple fix whatsoever. What we have to do and what we have to worry about are the people who are caught in between these two states. The killings, the rape, name them. That's what we should really care about. And we should be providing assistance to those people so that they can have some safety nets in terms of food, health, and just be with their families. Now, one thing that Canada can do is to build, if we're going to say that the Palestinians who are in Canada to go back, we have to build those institutions. We have to build the capacity of those institutions in Palestine, and we have to empower the people who are here so that they can do what, building back their country. Let me give you an example. Somalia has been in war for so long. And now the people who are so educated, who have the means to go back, are going back and really building their nation. What is stopping the Palestinians from here, with our support as Canadians, to actually do the same in Palestine?
Thanks for that question. And as some of the previous speakers mentioned, Canada might not take an active role. Canada can take a more active role. We're one of the G7 countries, one of the most wealthiest countries in the entire world. Don't let them tell you it can't be done. Canada can be a broker of peace, not just here in Canada, but across the world, whether it's in China, but particularly in Palestine. And it starts with disarmament, making sure that there is no means of war, making sure that we have a fair table to sit at. Both parties can actually negotiate in true and honorable faith to make sure there's an actual conclusion, to make sure those dialogues are there. So I want to support a robust dialogue that doesn't involve any guns like the other parties would have it. We want to disarm our participation in selling weapons to Israel to incentivize peace. That's the point of doing that. And we'd hope that other countries would join us in asking for that peace and common dialogue. And for so long, Egypt has played the role. I know not everyone agrees with Egypt's role in that, but Egypt has played a role thus far to ensure that some peace and stalemates are there. Of course, they've always fall through. We need to go further than that. We need more partners to ensure that that brokerage of peace is sustained, that Palestinians stay.
Thank you, I want to thank you very much. I think we can safe to say that we can sit.
Just one question. Sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Mohamud Amin. Cheers, thanks. Hi, my name is Mohamud Amin. I came to Canada 6 years ago from Damascus, Syria. I'm Palestinian Syrian. I've been refugee twice before, so I'm eternally thankful for the opportunity that Canada has given, whether I came under Harper, but still my appreciation is for the people of the land, not those who somehow climbed to rule it. My question is, on my very first vote as a Canadian citizen, with polls so close between the the NDP candidate over there, Desjarlais, and Diotte, that's who's, if I'm to strategically vote, which is typically Canadian, why should I vote for the Liberal Party when it's a lost vote?
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. That's a good question. Before I was nominated, the story was the NDPs and the Conservatives are very close. For the last 1 month, my team and I have been door knocking, and we have been flipping. There was no survey that was conducted in the riding to actually confirm what your claim is. It's a three-way race, and we are working so hard, and we will surprise you on the 20th of this month.
Thank you, Dr. Habiba. Thank you.
Well, in terms of strategic voting, it's something that's long been a practice of federal Liberals to convince districts across our country that New Democrats don't vote for New Democrat because that's a wasted vote. So what you're saying, strategic voting, is actually a traditional Liberal perspective. And so New Democrats, we often respond with vote your heart. I think it's important in a healthy democracy to actually look at issues and deeply and know that when you cast your ballot, it has to be something you deeply agree with. And so I sincerely hope that you vote for the party that you know will best represent you and your interests. But second, we are in a tight race here. Kerry, Diotte, and federal NDP candidates have always come second to Kerry, Diotte in this district, and we've never been more invested, we've never worked as hard, and we've never done as much as we have until this election. When 2015, when the riding was created, we started with Janice Irwin, now an MLA. We then went to Mark Charrington. We got second place twice, and this election, we're pretty confident we could, with your support, win this election.
Well, I think everybody should vote Conservative.
Okay.
That'd be my suggestion.
Great. Okay, I actually have one other question here for us. Go ahead, please ask the question. Go ahead. Yeah. We can be here for hours.
Pretty soon.
The candidates have been just absolutely amazing addressing the questions. I know there's a sake of time. I'm going to get into, but let me keep the question very simple.
Okay,
and then
it's very simple questions. Nothing to do with all these topics we were discussing all this whole day. The simple question, actually, I've been here for so long, and as an accountant, I see it's one of the topic actually Habiba actually was touching at the beginning regarding the employment and what they call the income disparities between, especially for the new immigrants. Like for so long, the new immigrants actually found themselves actually unemployed or stuck with survival jobs. And the other issue were what they call the foreign credentials. For so many years, all the politicians, I was involved for politics for so many years, liberal, conservative, NDP, they always talk about this issue. And they never had a concrete plan to solve this problem. As a new candidates, what's your plan to put forward to solve this issue? Because that's a question all my kids actually are in university now. Some of them graduate. And as an accountant, I see that the income disparities for the people, what they are facing, the challenges they are facing, especially for the newcomer. Do you have any?
I'm going to ask you guys to hold on to that question. Remember, I'm going to ask you that question. I'm going to ask the candidates to answer two questions at the same time, if they don't mind, and that will be the last of it. Go ahead.
Sorry. Thank you, everyone, for the time, and thank you especially when Mr. Diotte didn't show up, that you coming forward and then sharing your perspectives from the Conservatives. My question is related to Aaron Toole's platform, and it's about the immigration. So, under the name or under the banner of efficiency, the platform proposes that to expedite for those who can pay. I'm kind of bothered that because if you are, and I appreciate that the platform promotes family reunification, sponsorships, great. But if you have to pay, wouldn't that create a two-tier? If I am a new immigrant from Syria who arrived here, like my brother here said 6 years ago, and I want to bring my families, if I cannot pay, wouldn't I get disservice compared to those who can afford? What about those Afghan refugees who are expected to come here? Or if I have a family back in Kabul today, if I can't pay that, so wouldn't that create an equitable access to visas for those who Canadians have always welcomed and wanted, for those who are refugees fleeing from their countries?
Thanks so much. So, I'll get Blake to answer that question. So we have two parts. We're talking about income disparity, and then we're talking about Yeah, no, for sure. So, this is on the platform. Yeah. Okay, sounds good. So we've got two questions. We have to ask you first on the disparity income side of it. So that's why I say that we'll get Blake, and then for sure Ms. Blake. Okay. Blake, go ahead.
Sure. To the first question related to employment, this is something that has been well studied, well documented in Canada for a long time, but particular to Indigenous communities, and how we solved this issue it started from the 40s. When Indigenous people came back from World War II, they had the same question: where is our jobs in Canadian society? We're paying taxes, we serve the country, where's our fair share? And so we built a model at that time. And this model was the shared equity data collection surveys. And so through Census Canada, we introduced the process, we fought boundaries and had folks voluntarily declare who they are, what income brackets they're part of, where they've come from, country of origin, etc. And those tools over time have been able to project deficits. And we tabled that with Canada in the constitutional talks in the 1980s, and we asked for constitutional protection and inclusion for employment in the future. What we were able to do was, in that time, in the last 30 years, invest about $5 billion in supporting our youth, so that when they got through the education system and graduated, we tracked them and got them employment. Now our employment is increasing, not yet at par. Takes that long, but we propose to do the same thing. Make sure that there's a national registry to ensure that we actually hit designated targets for employment for Muslim communities, members. Should I answer the second question, sorry?
Yeah, for sure. If you have anything to tech one?
Oh, well, the second question, I certainly agree with what you're saying regarding the immigration issue. Like, it's a terrible system to have a two-tiered one. I'm adamantly opposed to a two-tiered immigration system. The entire thing needs to overhaul to look at our refugee intake, first and foremost, the folks who need it first and the most, and then family reunification. Sorry, I tried to be really fast.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My apologies. I should have asked you for that second question part of it too. Are you okay with that response to that?
Yes.
Fantastic. Habiba.
Okay, so great question. We can't all get employed, for sure, but we can be self-employed as well. Here is what the Liberal Party is proposing. We are proposing easy access of capital to anybody who wants to be self-employed. Which party has that? I have no idea. What we're also proposing is to actually build the capacity of the young people who will have less time to look for a job or don't have the means to do so, and that is exactly what we are proposing. We are also proposing a rent-to-own program for Muslims. Not only Muslims, but everybody else, but it really specifically applies to us. Why? Because we don't believe in interest, as you know. So we are actually building things from the bottom to make sure that the Muslims are ready to take up their own jobs without being bogged down with interest or shy away from it. Also, we have eliminated interest rates on student loans. We don't have that program so that students can just apply and have access to capital and start their business right there. Yes. For the immigration issue, two-tier, no way. I had my own problems with immigration issues. I know the community that is in Edmonton Griesbach. It's one of the poorest communities in Edmonton, and there's no way we can accept a two-tier kind of a program. That is injustice in the highest order.
Thanks so much, Mr. Grant, you have the final word.
Thank you. So on credential recognition, we've put in place a plan for a national task force on this. It's complicated. It involves universities, professional associations, provincial governments, as well as the national government needing to work together. That's why we need that task force. But I think the idea we've put forward of including pre-qualification in that, working with institutions in other countries, distance learning, so that someone can get a Canadian-level credential before they come, so they can come with the certainty that they have a Canadian qualification that will allow them to walk off the plane and get to work. I think that's an innovative idea that we can really action. We haven't seen any action on it in 6 years. On the immigration issue, look, the Liberals have totally failed on processing times. We have people waiting years for workers, for spouses, family members, and others. What we've said is we need to put lots more money into hiring more people to do processing. We have other ideas for addressing the processing times, but one of them is we need more dollars going into that. We also have a situation of a major national deficit. So what we've said is, and the same system already exists. For those who think this is radical, I mean, the same system exists for a passport, right? If you need a passport quickly, you can pay extra to get that passport quickly, right? If you are paying to support family members overseas, and you say, actually, rather than spending money to support them overseas, I'd like to bring them here a little faster. I want to let you put more money into that system so that we can hire more people to do processing. Now, for those who can't afford to pay that extra amount, look, there already are fees for immigration applications. You already have to pay to file an immigration application. So allowing folks to pay a little bit more to put that money back into strengthening processing, that speeds up the process for everyone, including for those who don't pay. I mean,
the purchasing power is different in people in different countries. So if your affordability here is like in terms of our equity here is say whether you are in Syria or in Somalia or in Afghanistan. So what I'm saying is that don't you think that will create inequity?
But we already have that issue because we already have application fees, right? Like everybody. But if we were to make
more
those
needs to happen on
yeah.
this front, I think there needs to be some clarity on the program that's being offered.
So you're saying that if there is a problem, you don't add an additional problem to that, you resolve it.
Yeah, if I can just have one last response on that. What we need to do is speed up processing times across the board. The processing times are totally outrageous and unacceptable. Now, what we're saying is that if you allow people to put more money into that system, it is going to speed up the system for everybody. So creating an incentive to get more money into that system. But if we speed up the process for everybody, it means even those that choose not to pay that expedited processing. No, it is, because even those that,
I think there's more to be done. I didn't want to cut you off. I think.
Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of clarity that needs to happen over here, guys. I know there's many questions to go to. Mark, you got like 15 seconds I can give you. I got to the wife. I'm going to get rapid. I have to take these guys over for lunch or something. I got to do that now.
Okay, a quick 15 seconds. Like, I lived abroad for 10 years. I lived in Sarajevo. I've experienced things that people don't necessarily as Canadians experience. Now, what you said about getting credentials qualified for Canada is extremely arrogant. In that most of these other countries, I lived in Bosnia during the war, just after the war, and those people were highly educated people. My wife is an immigrant from that country and couldn't get her credentials recognized here in Canada. The education system in Yugoslavia before the war was one of the highest regarded education systems in the world. So when you're talking about getting credentials recognized, it's extremely arrogant, and I don't understand how, as a government, you're asking this. Maybe you can speak to that, please.
Thank you much for that. You guys, I'm going to give you guys at least, I'm just going to give you like 15, 30 seconds to apply to that too. The question is open for all. Go ahead, Kevin.
Sir, I'm just describing an objective legal reality, which is that there are many qualifications from other countries that are not currently recognized here in Canada. You might tell me that it's arrogant for me to point out that legal reality. I don't think it's arrogant to point out the fact that many newcomers to Canada struggle because their qualifications are not recognized here in Canada. So I want to work on improving the system so that their qualifications will be recognized in Canada. That's a real practical problem that needs to be solved, and I want to apologize for working on solving it.
Thanks so much, Mr. Gordon. Habiba.
Earlier on, remember I said immigration, when the Conservatives were ruling this country, was focusing only on people from Europe and closing the doors from especially people from Africa. So that's exactly what's happening here, and that applies to exactly what Sharif's question was. So period. That's who they are, and that's what you'll have to choose on 20th between Conservatives and the Liberals, because that's the two race.
Well, I certainly, it's heartbreaking to know that your wife had to go through something like this. This experience of being devalued, especially as someone so highly educated in one of the world's most wealthiest countries at that point. We need in Canada a better and more robust system. Like Habiba just mentioned, there's active barriers to stopping people who are educated outside of Europe from coming to Canada and having a life that they once had, or a quality of life they once had when they came. We have to reduce those barriers by making sure that Canada's system recognizes them.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. I want to thank each and every one of you. I want to thank you so much for your I want to make sure that we thank you and a round of applause for our candidates who have mercilessly answered your questions. Thank you so much. There's a lot that's coming your way. I do encourage you to be speaking with all your candidates to make sure that you are asking questions, engaging them, understanding what the process is. But thank you so much again, and thanks for attending. Thank you so much.
Yes, I said